All right. So Daniel. Why are we going to go through Daniel? Hey, Nancy. Why are we going to go through Daniel? Because Donna wanted to. All right. There you go. Yep. It's a great book. Daniel is got a lot of different angles to it. It's entertaining, really, with just the intrigue. We were talking about Sunday school stories. I mean, we all remember the fiery furnace, the lion's den, the statue. I mean, all of those things. So it's entertaining on that level. Jim said he started reading, and next thing you know, he's up to 6 and 7 chapters. Because it's like, wow, this is cool. So it's an interesting one to pull you in with it, with all the suspense and the mystery. But Daniel also opens up the door to the Gentile future. The history of the Gentiles is all laid out. And when you start looking at it, you see the stuff that's coming to pass today, right now. You hear people say, well, you can't prove the Bible. And that means you're not going to be able to prove God or your Christian walk. But it's not true. Daniel is going to be one of those books that we're going to be able to show you how you can prove the Bible, but not only that, be able to say, this is why I believe what I believe. As opposed to, I started thinking about this. There's no other book that people try to claim that's religious that can make that claim. The Quran can't do it. Any of the writings from Hindu, Yogi, any of them, nothing. The Bible does. So as we go through it, you're going to get a lot out of it. And it contains one of the most amazing passages in the Bible, and we've already looked at it a couple times, but we'll go into it in depth. Chapter 9, that 70 weeks of Daniel. There are so many things that we're seeing today happening. There's hundreds and hundreds, thousands of them that we're seeing from men that were written so far long ago, and we're seeing them happen now. And we're seeing them pop up. And I really think that for us to be forewarned is forearmed. And it doesn't really make any difference if we're looking at the armor of God on Sunday morning, or if we're reading Daniel on Tuesday night. It's something that we're gaining that's going to give us something to be able to use for today. And she's real sensitive to the spiritual things that are going on, the kind of atmosphere what's going on. So when she said Daniel, it made sense, especially with the things that are going on. We'll talk a lot about the temple, things like that. And it made me think, I ran into a lady today that said that the Temple Institute is who controls what's going to be happening on the temple when the temple's built in Israel. And she said that she posted something on their website. It was Daniel 9:27. And Daniel 9:27 is where it starts talking about the Antichrist is making a deal with them. This is when the abomination of desolation happens. They banned her and took her comments off the website. So you can see that the division's already starting to happen, where that group of people isn't listening to the word, not even Daniel. See, I understand New Testament, they're Jewish, but they're not even listening to Daniel. Their eyes are blinded to it. So this is the kind of stuff that as we go through and see it, it's going to apply for today. Some of these chapters, we're talking about the Gentile history, some of these chapters in here are written in Aramaic. They're not written in Hebrew. I think there's probably five of them. There's one chapter that is actually written by the Gentile king, Nebuchadnezzar. He actually wrote the chapter, and then he sent it out all around the world. So when you read Daniel, it's something that's interesting, because typically you'll go, oh, well, it's a Hebrew book written by this guy. There's a lot to this. We've got a lot of things going on. You'll see things like from Alexander the Great, Cyrus, some of the things that were happening with that we know about from even Hollywood movies, but you'll get to apply it. So this panorama of history, when we look at this, the idea is that we're going, okay, we're learning about the Old Testament. We went through Hosea. Now remember our study of Hosea. It covered, once Israel was split in half, that civil war had occurred right after Solomon. It was his sons. The northern kingdom was Israel, and that is when Hosea was talking to them. And when we went through Hosea, we saw it. It was a huge comparison to America. A lot of the things that we saw were just like that. So when we look at Daniel now, Daniel is going to be speaking about the southern kingdom, Judah. So when you see this right here starting on the far left, it kind of goes all the way through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, moves to the flood, Abraham. We're just about, see, the exile has already gone through, but now the split in the monarchy happens. So now there's two. That's just about where we're at. You can see that we're 600 years from Christ right about now when he's writing this right here. So I know that we've said this a bunch of times, and I thank Chuck for putting it out there and we get to stand on it. But this principal discovery here that we stand on is that what we're reading in our Bible is not just a religious book. This is a collection of messages. It's integrated. It's in codes. It's a way that you can say that Bible right there came from God no matter what. And it's easily able to say that the author of your Bible is outside of time, because the things that are said, how they're said, where they're placed, the information that's said, the only way that it could be done that way is if someone outside of time. So God, not being a human. Now, when we see this, it's based on 66 books that were written by 40 authors, over 40 authors, over a period of 2,000 years. And no matter how you move this around and see these people, there's going to be things that one guy that wasn't in the same generation, wasn't anywhere near another guy, and they say something that the only way they would have been able to know that with each other would have been from outside communicating it, the Holy Spirit. And that's where we start to see that the Word, it's God's Word, it's breathed. And it's for doctrine, correction, and reproof. And that's where we take this right here so that we can understand that. That's where we're shooting for. That our faith grows in the Bible, and thus it grows when we read what's happening, and then we apply it to our life. So it is a real life application here. So that leads us to something that I've said numerous times. We really need to understand the history of our physical Bible. See, we were not educated in it. We were born late 20th century, early 21st century. We're dealing with the things where man has taught us something. Man has pointed us in a direction. We went to Sunday school, whatever, and we skimmed across the surfaces. That's all we got. Wherever we come from, it could be Nazarene, it could be Catholic, it could be whatever. But we skimmed across the surface, and that's the extent of it. So what starts to happen is we get the Bible. I can slap Holy Bible on the outside of anything and hand it to somebody. The thing is, you need to know what is it I'm exactly reading. Because if I'm going to put my faith in this, if I'm going to read this and go, God said it, I believe it. Well, did God say that? Is that the translation that we're talking about? So when we dig into that, that's why we say it's very important to find out what exactly we're reading. Now in this instance right here, the Old Testament text that we have, I broke this down just so you can get an idea. The original Hebrew is called the Vorlaga. That is the text that the Old Testament, the Hebrew, had been written in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. That's when they had started collecting together what was the Tanakh, the Old Testament. Then, when we get down to Alexander, when Alexander the Great conquered everything, he wanted everybody to speak Greek. So what he did was he collected 70 scholars. And it took them a number, I don't remember what the number was, I think it was 15 years. They were in Alexandria. That was one of their eras. That's why they call it Alexandria, it's Alexander the Great. So when they were there, they translated all of the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek. So now we have a very accurate Old Testament in Greek that nothing has been messed with. Now if you see that last one that's right there, it's called the MT, Masoretic Text. After Christ came and after his disciples now are moving and going, when they would go out and teach, they taught Christ, right? what did they teach from? You wouldn't have heard one of those disciples say, turn to 1 Peter, because 1 Peter wasn't written. The New Testament wasn't there yet. So what did they teach from? The Old Testament. What you're going to see, most of those quotes in the New Testament is the Greek Septuagint version. That was the Greek one. Well, by the time we get to 90 AD, there was a council that got put together by the Jewish people, and it was called the Council of Yamnia. And what they did, basically they said, we don't want these guys teaching from the same book that we teach from, the collection of books. So they went back through and retranslated everything that was in the Old Testament, and they started to alter and change and do the things that's there to fit that Christ wasn't the Messiah, because they didn't want that in there. I'll give you an example. There's a scripture in Hebrews where he says, a body you have prepared for me. New Testament. It quotes that it's coming from the Psalms. You go back into that psalm and look at it. In the Masoretic Old Testament, it says, an ear you have opened for me. That's a huge difference. Because when Paul was said that a body you have prepared for me, we're talking about Christ paying for our sins. When you look at the one in Psalms, it's completely off. Well, why would they do that? Because they're trying to get rid of Christ in the back. So you say, okay, well, when would we ever run into the Masoretic text? Every one of us is holding one in our hand right now. All of the Old Testaments that we're holding, and I haven't seen one yet that doesn't have it, it leans on MT, Masoretic text. So how can you fix that? As of today, there isn't one. So this is the closest that we can get to. But when you go to research accuracy, go on the internet, look up Septuagint, and you'll find a Septuagint of whatever verse you were looking for. And it's very accurate. So that gives you kind of an idea about making sure that we're staying on top of it. Now the reason that I'm saying that is because there's a verse that we kind of stand on here, and it's the verse itself is these were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, in that receive the word with all readiness, like we're sitting right here, but we search the scriptures to find out if these things were so. The bottom line is don't let any man teach you anything you latch on to and then say that's got to be gospel because that man said it. So you dig and you search and you check, and if it takes going, why did that verse say that? And you go looking, you might have to go look at a Septuagint. You might have to do some research to do it. Does that mean you got to go do that in the middle of a church service? No, you take it all in and then go check it out. So, yeah.
One of the examples of that, if you've ever heard any skeptics talk about the prophecy of Jesus being born, a virgin shall give birth. And they say, yeah, but the Jewish word for that isn't really virgin, it just means a young girl. Okay, well when they translated it into the Septuagint, the Greek word that they used was exclusively of a virgin.
Yep.
So they knew exactly. So.
As opposed to a good woman.
As opposed to a good woman.
And I think we could all vote that there's a really big difference in a virgin and a good woman. Not to them. So the idea is, like Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. How about that? Love that quote. So when we sit there and we start getting into our battles on our daily basis, when we're going to work, going to wherever we're going and doing stuff, the enemy is going to come in and whisper things in your ear. If you are not absolutely positive that what you're reading is God's word, then what are you going to be standing on? How are you going to be able to respond to these battles that happen if you're not absolutely, this is God's word, that's it. So that's my point that I'm making. The reason I said that is the critics that were involved with trying to say that Daniel was not correct are all over the place. And you'd think, well, who cares? As we go through this, you're going to find when Malachi, the last book of the Old Testament, Chuck Messer says Malachi, that's the Italian book. So you get to the last book of the Old Testament, and then we don't pick up until Matthew. There's 400 years that aren't written about. So they said, well, those are the missing years, or the silent years. So when we go through Daniel, you're going to find out those 400 years were detailed in Daniel. And they hit the mark so perfectly that the critics say that's not possible. You would have had to write that after the fact for you to know that that's how accurate it was. And the critics go on and on and on. So when you look at this, you start thinking, wow, Daniel's got a lot more to it than I was thinking. Meaning, when we start talking about the stuff that's going to deal with our time, now you're going to go, whoa, hold on a second. If he was that accurate about those 400 years, that means he's going to be that accurate about the other stuff. So these critics start rising up. Actually, there is no other book in history that is as validated as the book of Daniel. It has got so many different angles where they said it was written by Daniel at this time, and this is what he said. It's way too specific to have anybody that's discrediting it make any sense. It says in 332 BC, Alexander the Great was coming in to conquer Jerusalem. Now, as he was going to come in to conquer Jerusalem, there was a priest, Jaddua, that showed him references to himself in the book of Daniel. And when he did, he spared Jerusalem. He was going to flatten it. Well, that was written by Josephus, which is a totally respected worldwide historian for antiquities. And you can pick up the works of Josephus. So you're seeing how, okay, Jerusalem was even spared. Dave came up with...
11, chapter 8.
Oh, Dave was researching this while he was looking, and he found that there was even more to that story itself.
Basically what happened is, I don't know if you know the story of Alexander, but he's conquering Tyre, and he needs men and supplies. He says, okay, he talks to one people, I think it was the Samaritans, and he says, you give me some. Yeah, we'll bring you some guys. Okay, no problem. Israel, Judah, you bring me some. Sorry, we have pledged our allegiance to Darius. So as long as he's alive, we can't help you out. And he goes, oh, really? Okay, flatten Tyre, I'm coming to get you. The high priest, Jaddua, he basically says, God, we kind of need your help. So he gives him a dream of how to greet Alexander the Great. As he comes in, all the priests are in their fine white linen robes and everything like that. And I mean, they're dressed and they're just like welcoming. He comes up and he leaves all of his generals behind, comes up, sees the high priest, sees he's got the golden plate on his chest, and he bows down and he says, I'm not bowing down to you, but to God who gave me a dream, and I saw your face years ago when I was at home. So I know that that's you. And I know that, and they say he actually went and made a sacrifice to God. Then, that's when the high priest says, oh, by the way, let me show you the book of Daniel. It talks about you. And he goes, it talks about a Greek ruler going to conquer Persia. He goes, that's got to be me.
And this is Alexander the Great. We've seen it, saw movies, all that. The next one up there is...
It didn't happen until 50 years after, so,
yeah. Yeah, that's why they're trying to say that's way too accurate. There's no way that Daniel could have written that. That book of Daniel had to have been written after it happened, so they got the details down. Well, or God, that is outside of time, told Daniel what to write. The next one there is, I believe that's Kadui. From 1899 to 1917, there were excavations done of Nebuchadnezzar's palace. And the banquet hall, everything. And he even shows you it's 173 feet by 56 feet. So they found it. It's there. It's exactly how they described. The wall where the hand that was writing, they found it. It's there. Well, Saddam Hussein, while he was alive, was rebuilding these palaces. His intentions was to be the next Nebuchadnezzar, the next one in line. And you can read, that's exactly what he's trying to do. So all of the stuff that was from Daniel, it was absolutely happening. And we found it. We found all this proof to it. Now, here's the ultimate authentication for this book that we're reading. Jesus actually quotes Daniel 3 times, and he calls him Daniel the prophet. I mean, that's a pretty good authentication that Jesus even mentions him like that. It's quoted 3 times in the book of Ezekiel. So remember, these guys are living approximately the same times. Ezekiel is quoting Daniel. It would be like me quoting Chris. And Chris said, butter on toast. And I put it in there. And we're living around the same time. So it's the same kind of thing where Ezekiel's doing it. he was also classed, when something is said about him, he's put with Noah and Job. You'll see it kind of linked together with those groups, Noah and Job and Daniel, because they're so powerful. These books, the information they're laying out there, and who's saying it to them. He's one of only two of which no evil is spoken of. Now that doesn't mean he didn't sin. That's not the point. Out of everything that's worded, there's two other guys in the Bible that nothing evil was spoken about them. That's pretty interesting. Inside this thing, you're going to find that there were foreign words in here. There's 15 Persian words. There's 3 Greek words. You'd expect that from a guy who has dealt with so many different classes and cultures. I wouldn't doubt it if this guy spoke multiple languages, tons of languages, because he was able to deal with it. Now, we're going to see the kind of guy Daniel is when we get started, but we're not talking about the run-of-the-mill guy. This guy was very intelligent, very smart. Now, when we go through here, we're going to see he was a teenager when he was deported. So when he was serving in court in Babylon, he was young. So that's how he was able to span all of those generations, was because he started off as just a kid. He was young, well, a man, in those days. So now, as we go through here, the organization of the book is kind of important. I want to lay it out so you can see it, because as you read it, you'll get kind of screwed up if you're trying to figure out where to place stuff. So the organization, the first 6 chapters are historical. So as we read them, you're going to see, like, he was deported as a teenager, Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the fiery furnace is in 3, Nebuchadnezzar's pride is in 4, the fall of Babylon, the lion's den, and then you see Daniel's vision. See how the vision is not historical? The vision is future. So the first 6 are historical. Now notice chapters 2 through 7 are all written in Aramaic. There's a Gentile focus about them. Chapter 4 is the chapter that Nebuchadnezzar wrote. And you'll see why he wrote it once we get there. But he wrote that chapter specifically honoring God. This is a Gentile king worshiping Marduk, and he writes this entire chapter saying, God's the one that saved me. And then we go, chapters 8 through 12, are, the focus is really going to kind of be on Israel. Now, these other ones here, as we head into them, 7, we start talking about the 4 beasts. The ram and the he-goat, and then the 70 weeks. You guys are a little familiar with that one, chapter 9. And then there's kind of a glimpse of the dark side of 10. And then 11, remember I told you about those 400 years? 11 talks about those silent years, what happened in there. And then 12 kind of wraps it up. It's kind of a consummation of all things. Now, Daniel was born under the king Josiah. Now remember, as we go through, and I'm going to show you a little thing here in a second, but as you go through the kings, you're going to see that there were some nasty kings. Just horrible, terrible kings. But we run into one named Josiah, and he was literally spring cleaning the temple, and they had put altars and sacrifice. They'd done everything in there. It's terrible. Well, they got down to where Josiah found the law, and it was basically shoved in a closet. And as he started reading it, he's telling the priests and whatnot, he goes, this is what we were supposed to be doing. So he gets them cleaned out. Everything's cleaned out. They sanctify the temple. They get everything back up. So Josiah was a good guy. This is when Daniel was born and was living under this. That's why it was a real good example. It was during this time that when it was starting to go south, I believe that the scriptures are teaching us that, from like 2 Chronicles 35, that Ark of the Covenant was given to Pharaoh Necho of Egypt to take it and put it into safe hiding. And that's why we'll see some things that happen as we go through here. But that's one of the things. And Josiah was trying to say, hey, let's get that back over here and start taking care of it. And he was ended up killed in a battle he shouldn't have been in. But this is Josiah. Good guy. This is where Daniel was raised up. Now, if we looked at this in the order that it is, the way it occurs, this is how it would line up. You would read the chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 7, 8, and then 5, 9, 6, and then 10 through 12. This is how they would be in order. So as we're reading them, you're going to say, wait a second, didn't that happen? Yeah. So you're going to have to put them in order. So I gave you this one so you can kind of get an idea. This is how they would have been if it went A, B, C, D, straight down the line. Now here's something I made, and I hope it's going to work out for what I'm trying to do here. Here's a history lesson for you. Israel. Its first king was Saul. Then its second king was David. Its third king was Solomon, which makes the fourth king, King Rehoboam. That is Israel in one piece. Nothing changes. It's all together. David was actually the one that kind of really unified all of those tribes together. Now what happened was, at Rehoboam, there's a civil war that occurs. And Rehoboam breaks off and says, I'm going north, and we're going to do our own thing. So Jeroboam is in what they're calling Israel in the north. Rehoboam is in the south, what they're calling Judah. It was just a civil war, not really much unlike what happened in America. So when you're looking at this, the Assyrians come in. It says kings of Israel. That's wrong. It should say kings of Judah. So Assyria comes in, and notice how they conquer the northern kingdom. If that map was bigger, you'd see Assyria was huge. They just conquered all kinds of stuff. They were massive. So as this occurs, these are the kings that were in that order. So it goes from Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat. See that one? Queen? I found that in a list. So you ladies that are looking for something to look up that's interesting, write her name down. And it is an interesting story. I didn't study it out, but I did get her name down, and it is an interesting story. The one thing you want to look up at is who was her mom and dad. Now, Joash, Amaziah, Azariah, see how some of them have two names. When we get down into these guys down here, there's a couple of them. Jehoiakim actually has three names. He's known by three different names. But anyways, as I go through all these, you see Josiah. Well, Josiah is where Daniel grew up during that period. So this is the good guy. And then it goes to Joahaz, and then to Jehoiakim. This is what happens when Daniel was getting deported. So this is Assyria. So the next thing that happens is Babylon comes in and conquers Assyria. So in this story here, Babylon is being led by a guy named Nebuchadnezzar. This is the guy leading it. His son was a fantastic general named Nebuchadnezzar. He's out conquering things. Really not much different than Alexander. So he's out conquering things. He's coming through the area that we're looking at on the map that is, Saudi Arabia. Is he heading back up to across what is Jerusalem? He gets the word, your dad died. And as soon as he gets that word, he knows he's the guy now. He's the one in charge. So he sweeps through here. This is the first siege that he goes through. Jehoiakim, nasty king. He's conquered, he's captured, but he's released to be a ruler for Nebuchadnezzar. He says, you know the area, you know the people, I'll make a deal with you. I'm going to set these people underneath your control as long as you're doing what I'm telling you to. So, deal with me or else. So what he does is he takes one of his kids with him as a hostage to say, I got your kids, you're gonna take care of what needs to be taken care of. In this sweep, Daniel gets picked up, as well as Daniel's three friends. So now this is the first sweep as he's going through. This starts literally to the day, the 70-year servitude of the nations. Now, as I got to go through this, there's some obvious things that we'll see, and it's a good thing to learn them, but here's something that's kind of a sidecar that God was showing me. The reason for this servitude of the nations is God in the law had specifically said, I will get from you one Sabbath year, sabbatical year, every 6. Meaning, if we're going to go plant something over here, we can plant it for 6 years. But on that 7th year, we don't plant anything over there. We should have collected everything on that 6th year to get us through the 7th. That sounds like coming through the wilderness. On that 6th day, they had to collect enough manna for both days.
He even promised on the 6th year, I will increase your yield.
Yeah, I'll increase what you got so it'll get you through. They never did it. They kept going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They just kept going. They kept going. Well, it gets to the point to where God said, I'm getting my 70. So how did he do it? Remember when we went through Hosea? They were doing great. They're doing fine. Everything's great. They start worshiping idols. They start doing all kinds of stuff. What happened? Assyria moved in, conquered them. So now here's the rest of Israel with an opportunity to go, we need to get straight. We need to tighten up. What'd they do? Nothing. We got wicked kings. We got all this stuff going on. So God goes, fine. He sends Babylon in and takes them. Now notice, when we go through this, you're going to see it was a pretty light conquering, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm sure there was people dead, don't get me wrong, but it was definitely something where it could have been worse. So all of this is where God's saying, I'm giving you an opportunity to hear what I'm telling you. And this 70 years is because you didn't follow what I was telling you to do. We sit here and we think about things like this prosperity message where everything is supposed to be great, yet we're not following what God's doing. If we start following what God's doing, of course your lives are going to be blessed. But when you've got sin in the house and you're not paying attention to what's going on, you're basically telling God, I don't care what you say, I'm going to do my own thing. What happens? Okay, so then, here's your second siege. Jehoiakim ignores what's being told to him. This is a judgment from God. He's telling him, suck it up. We were wrong. We need to straighten this out. If this is our judgment that 70 years is going to be what we need to be because we were wrong, then 70 years is what it's going to be. Jehoiakim says, no. He gathers up false prophets. What do you guys think? They literally tell him, oh no, this is never supposed to happen to us. We're God's people. Nothing bad is ever supposed to happen to us. We're always supposed to have the high parts of the land. Doesn't that sound like some of the nonsense that's being taught today? So, what does he have the choice to do? Listen to Jeremiah, who's saying, stop. This is God's instrument of judgment. Don't rebel from this. Or, listen to it. So, 5-year battle comes up. Jehoiakim dies. His son, Jehoiachin, or Jeconiah, same name, reigns until the siege is over, and now there's a blood curse on the royal line. God said, nothing is ever going to come out of this guy's line. I will never let anybody that's in his family reign over Israel again. So now, Jeconiah is captured along with 10,000 other captives, including, now Ezekiel's gone. So now Ezekiel gets picked up along with all these other artists and whatnot. So now Zedekiah, who's his uncle, is installed as the king in Jerusalem. Same deal. Listen here, uncle. I'll put you in charge. But don't pull what your nephew did. I got no patience for this. So okay, we're going to do that. We're going to do that. Jeremiah and Ezekiel have been warning against this rebellion, but these false prophets are still talking and they're still listening. Ezekiel is in Babylon writing, stop, don't do it. Don't rebel from this. Jeremiah is in Jerusalem saying, stop, don't do it. So what happens? The third siege. Zedekiah ignores Jeremiah's and Ezekiel's warnings, and he yields to the false prophets, and he rebels. In the third siege, Nebuchadnezzar, he's had it. I'm done. I've had it with you guys. He flattens them. That's when the temple's destroyed. The Jewish temple is now destroyed. The city is flattened. It's wasted. It looks like a desert because they wouldn't listen. Now this begins the 70-year desolation of Jerusalem. Another 70-year punishment. Now these 70-year punishments are not going to run concurrent. They actually run from the time they started. They're two separate ones, and they're not at the same time. So one of them started, and then a few years later, the other one started. This one is theirs because God said, you did something wrong, I'm correcting you. And now you're in my face over the correction because you don't like the correction for what you did that was wrong. So now you're getting punished for not accepting the correction. And you look at this and you go, well, that in itself is prophetic with us. Without diving into it, think about America. Yes, it's a disaster, but it's got nothing to do with any of the politics you want to blame it on. It's got everything to do with the sin that is here. And it's not the sin of the other people, it's the sin of the church. So if we would just accept our correction, humble ourselves, seek His face, He would hear from heaven and heal our land. So we're getting ready to get the second one now because we're not listening to the first one. So the history lesson kind of ties into some other stuff, I guess. All right, so now that we get through that, we see that there's some contrary passages that people like to bring up. And here's one of them. God says what He means and means what He says. So He tells him in Ezekiel 12:13, my net also will I spread upon him, and he shall be taken in my snare, and I will bring him to Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans, yet he will not see it, though he will die there. Well, that sounds contradictory. How's that supposed to occur? Well, Jeremiah finishes it. Then the king of Babylon killed the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes in Rabbah. The king of Babylon also killed all of the nobles of Judah. See, this is where they're dying now. This is the third siege. Moreover, he's talking about the king of Babylon, moreover, he put out Zedekiah's eyes. Now he can't see. And bound him with bronze fetters to carry him off to Babylon. Where did he die? Babylon. Did he ever see it? No. Because he poked his eyes out. So when you read your Bible, don't skim across stuff. Read it. What did it just say? What did that mean? That's interesting. What was that? Because folks that want to argue about your Bible go, well, look, that's impossible. Looks like it's not. Looks like it's not impossible. All right, so with all that, let's dive in, okay? Chapter 1. We'll start off right here and grab the first couple of verses. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the articles into the treasure house of his God. Now, it says the 3rd year of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, so we're getting an idea about which one we're talking about. This is the bad king that we had. Now, Jehoiakim was placed on the throne by Judah, by the Pharaoh Necho, to succeed his brother. Those were the two brothers of the horrible king. Both of these guys were evil. They were son of Josiah, though, that was a good king, the godly king, and that was the one that led that last revival. Now, when you see the land of Shinar, that would be like me saying he carried them off to California. That's not a city, that's an area. So Shinar is where it even says that when they came off the boat, Noah's Ark, it says they came from the east to the land of Shinar. So this is telling you where they were heading. Generically speaking, this is the area. So that's what he's talking about. Oh, I didn't even give it to you. Sorry about that. All right, so when you're looking at this, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. Okay, so we got that, no problem. Here's the question. Who was responsible for the victory? What I just told you about their being punished, and then you're seeing this, How easy is it for Christians to go, oh, I bind you up, Satan, in Jesus' name. How are you getting all crazy when it's Satan when you might be getting corrected in some area? See, some of these people find Satan behind every corner and lamppost and everything that's going on. When you're walking in known sin, God's told you about it. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. So who's responsible for this victory? It says the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. God gave him into his hand. God is the one that gave the victory to the Babylonians. Whoa. Now, when you see this, what did God give Nebuchadnezzar? It almost looks like it's payment. It says, some of the articles of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God. It says that he gave him, and the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the articles of the house of God. God gave him some of those things. Now you notice it doesn't say all? Because there was actually an inventory taken of what they actually took. Believe it or not, it's actually an inventory list. The Ark of the Covenant's not in it. All right, so another question here that just kind of stuck up in my head was, it says to his God. Who was his God? Who is this Babylonian guy's God? Dave and I just did a real quick search, and we found Marduk, M-A-R-D-U-K, Marduk. And we started chasing it down. One of the oldest civilizations on the earth is Sumer. And that was the god from Sumer. And we chase it down, it ties back to the moon god. And the moon god is always relating back to, in Chaldean, it's Lucifer, Satan. Different name, same guy. Okay, in verse 3. Then the king instructed Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, to bring some of the children of Israel and some of the king's descendants and some of the nobles, young men in whom there was no blemish, but good-looking, gifted in all wisdom, possessing knowledge and quick to understand, who had ability to serve in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed for them a daily provision of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank, and 3 years of training for them, so that at the end of that time they might serve before the king. All right, interesting. Here's something I ran into. Eunuch, saris. It's a word meaning castrate. I think we've heard that before. Okay, got it. Eunuch, castrated, part of the officers. Do you know who else was a eunuch? Potiphar. Remember who Potiphar was? How did Joseph get in trouble when he was in Egypt? Potiphar's wife. Potiphar was a eunuch. There's the verse. Genesis 37:36. Now the Midians had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer. That's what the Bible says, officer. I looked up that word. That's the word they're translating officer. Eunuch of Pharaoh, captain of the guard. You're going to find a couple other spots where that thing surfaces. Now, does that change the story for you a little bit? Remember what Potiphar's wife was trying to do? She was trying to grab Joseph so him and her could get busy. If Potiphar was a eunuch, so what does that tell you? Being castrated and celibate and all that doesn't appear to be something that God's leaning towards. Huh? He was an officer, so it was all part of the package. He went out and did stuff, and
Could have been a symbolic wife.
Yep.
So when he goes to any,
because he was rich.
So he goes to the parties. Yep, here's my wife. Got a wife.
Mm-hmm. Weird, right? Now think about this. Whenever she accused Joseph of it, do you remember what Joseph's punishment was? He didn't get killed. He got sent to jail. You see that kind of thing happening in the Old Testament, somebody gets chopped into pieces. You don't get slapped on the wrist, but Joseph did. All right, so that was funny. But now here's another one. The nobles here. Some of the king's delicacies and some of the king's nobles. Something that we need to understand here was who Daniel was. He was not just a regular old schmo in Jerusalem. He was in the royal line. Daniel was literally down line of being a king. So he was in a royal line. Now when you look at this and they go to see who they scooped up, did you notice that description of what it was they were picking up? There was no blemish in them. Good looking. They don't want any ugly people. Gifted in all wisdom. Don't hate me because I'm beautiful, but if you're stupid, you're out too. Possessing knowledge, and also not just that you're intelligent, but that you can grasp things. I can explain things to you quickly, quick to understand. And they had the ability to serve. Don't need any big prideful attitudes in front of the king, right? Whom they might teach the language and literature of the Chaldeans. So the guys they're going to pick up, it's very specific. They're not just randomly plucking people up. They want certain people. Well, why is that? When they would go in and conquer a land, they would bring the captives from wherever it was. They would bring them in. If they were royalty, if they were upper class, they melted them in with their upper class. And then the other people that were the servant slaves or whatever, they would scatter them around the empire so that they would assimilate. If you can see how things have gone in some of the wars, we seem to do just the opposite. We'll capture them, put them in prison and kill them, gas them, whatever it was that people have done, which doesn't make any sense. They capture them, let them assimilate in, and then the idea being they're no longer, in this case, Judean. Now they're Babylonian because they're melting in, they're joining in, they're being a part. So that's the idea with these guys. Notice the food that he was giving them. Daily provisions of the king's delicacies and of the wine which he drank. This is not some, hey, we got some extra stuff over here. They were giving him exactly the same stuff the king got. Now remember, this is not a godly man, this king. So what happened, the food that he would eat was a lot like the stuff we were talking about in Romans. They would dedicate it to a god. There was all kinds of pagan stuff going on with that food. So the pagan god being a part of the food, Daniel didn't want any part of that. Daniel was saying, I don't want to do that. Daniel had to choose. At this moment, think about this. He just got carried off to Babylon. And he had to choose. There would be plenty of reasons just to go along. Hey, they forced me. They forced me to eat that great steak and the great food. They forced me to do that. Or continue to live godly even though no one was looking. That's why he's drawing this line in the sand here. All right, so let me go over here and take a look at this. Verse 6. And now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, if I said, who are those guys? Would anybody be able to tell me who they are? There you go. Now, don't you think it's funny how we know the Babylonian name? We don't know their Jewish name? When you tell the kids in Sunday school, hey, we're going to learn the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, yay! That's the Babylonian name. But yet, we didn't remember these ones, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And it's you can tell it's kind of a programming thing. That's the way Satan doesn't want that. He wants us reprogrammed away from it. Verse 7. To them, the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Now, when you look at these names, I knew that there was something more than just name swapping. So I went through and started checking what was going on with these names. Daniel's name, and if you think about it, all the names that ever got said. Remember when we did that thing from Adam to Noah? And all those names meant something. It's very specific how those names meant something. Okay, Daniel, in Hebrew, means God is my judge. Okay, got it. Now, Belshazzar is Prince of Bel. Okay, what does that mean? Well, Bel is the shortened name for the god Marduk. Marduk was the god that they appointed over Babylon as it was getting started way back. And then as they kept talking about it and saying it, they just started calling it Bel. There's also other spin-offs of it, like Baal. As a matter of fact, Dave found probably 4 or 5 of them that were like that. So the name is basically what he's saying is Belshazzar means Prince of Lucifer, Prince of Satan. Now look at Hananiah. Hananiah means beloved of the Lord. What a great name. But now he's Shadrach. Shadrach means command of Aku. Okay? Aku is an Akkadian older than Babylon. It was a group of people called the Akkadians. Do you remember when we were watching the 300 movie? Do you remember who they called to say, come help us? The Akkadians. And that's when they showed up, and then they ended up being the guys who go, hey, we don't want no part of this, and they left. Akkadians. Akkadian culture was actually way older than Babylon. We go back to like Sumer. This is the beginning cultures, like right off the boat kind of stuff. So in Akkadian, Aku is the name of the Babylonian god of the moon god. Now think about that for a second. We know of a god today that is a moon god. Does anybody know what it is? Allah. Allah. When they say Allah Akbar, the word is Al-Ilah, and Akbar is greater. They're saying Satan is greater. Lucifer is greater. So when you hear the peaceful religion, when you hear, oh, they're worshiping the same God we do, no, they ain't. They're worshiping the enemy of our God. Okay, now Mishael, who is as God? Who is as God? Think about that. That sounds like something we heard when it said, I am that I am, right? That's what Moses heard. Well, this is his Hebrew name is who is as God. Now he's Meshach. Now this is who is what Aku is. Who is as powerful as Aku? See how all these names are mirror images of whatever God's done. Satan is a mirror image. He's a phony. He's an imposter. That's all he can do is produce knockoffs. So that's what he's doing. These names are knockoffs of things that are godly. So he just reverses it. So who is what Aku is? So who is what Lucifer is? Who is what Allah is? Who is? That's what they're trying to say. So.
Did he know originally what those words meant and then had to change them? So he spoke both languages?
Nebuchadnezzar?
No, like the eunuch naming them knew both languages. He matched the meanings, like when he named them, the eunuch.
Oh, I don't doubt it. And I thought the exact same thing. I thought exactly the same thing. I thought he went through and said, oh, this guy's named, Mr. Loves chocolate cake. So he names him something that's reversed of it or whatever. Yeah, I totally think that's what happened. Yeah, Dave. So while you can see that they believed a lot in names, like matter of fact, that first one was Prince of Bel. This is the Prince of God. So this is the idea that he was supposed to be the protector of Nebuchadnezzar appointed by Baal. That's why he's the prince. That's why he's the protector of what's supposed to be happening. All these names meant something. They weren't just silly names. My shack, your shack, and a bungalow. You know? Okay, the last one, Azariah. The Lord is my help. And now he's Abednego. And every time I've seen that pronounced, there is a space in there. So it's Abednego. This is servant of Nebo. Now, I've heard that all over the place. Even in Walt Disney cartoons, I'm seeing some of this stuff pop up. And it's interesting that they would dig. Can't be that coincidental somebody didn't know. In Akkadian, Nebo being the Babylonian god of wisdom. Now, here's the thing. There's the Chaldean version that translates it Lucifer. So like when you read Isaiah 14:12, and it says Lucifer, son of the morning, that's the same word. So now he's the servant of, literally now, servant of Lucifer. So this is all Babylonian. Now remember, who was the first? Because it goes through the Assyrians and it moves into the Babylonians. What was one of the most incredible stories that we were reading in Genesis about Babylonians? It was the Tower of Babel. And the Tower of Babel was Nimrod. And what was the whole idea was that he was worshiping Satan. Here we go. The names are still sticking, even after all those years. All right. So you can kind of see that he wanted these Jews to start turning into Babylonians. Now, here's a verse that's really relating to this. It's Isaiah 39:7. And it says, "And they shall take away some of your sons who will descend from you, whom you will beget, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon." I mean, there's verses coming right from Isaiah that are telling them, this stuff's coming. You guys need to pay attention. And what did Israel do? Stuck their head in the sand. Okay, so verse 8, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the chief of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Notice that it says he purposed. Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's delicacies, nor with the wine he drank. He purposed in his heart that he would not do that. This is our most important stewardship. Christians today are facing the same kind of trial. Satan wants us to become conformed to this world. Remember Romans 12:1 and 2? Don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is the same kind of thing that's happening. And this is in the most pagan empire. He's keeping himself blameless before the Lord. How easy would it just be to give up? He's surrounded by all this stuff, paganism, and because of the type of person he is, he's smart, he's good looking, he's intelligent, he's all this stuff, he could write his own ticket. But yet, what he's doing is he's saying, I'm not going to do this. So that's why he did that. That's why he requested that from the chief of the eunuchs. Okay, 9. Now God had brought Daniel into the favor and goodwill of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your food and drink. For why should he see your faces looking worse than the young men who are your age? Then you would endanger my head before the king. So Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days, and let them give us vegetables to eat and water to drink, and let our appearance be examined before you, and the appearance of the young men who eat the portion of the king's delicacies, and as you see fit, deal with your servants. Now see where it says vegetables? They in the King James it calls it pulse. What it wasn't literally hand them some carrots. It would have been something that would have been a lot more similar to vegetable soup. It was something that had been, made up out of vegetables. So there was a lot of different things going on. Don't get the idea that he's just munching on a celery stick or something. The 10 days, when you see that in the Bible, 10 days is always a measurement for testing, a testimony, when you see that 10 days. So we talk about this officer and his fears. They were justified. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar was known to put out the eyes after killing the sons, making their houses into dunghills, roasting officers over a fire. So this guy's no joke. So when he says, hey, wait a second, this is going to get me in trouble. I'm going to lose my head over this. He was legit. How would you have handled it? That guy comes over and says, hey, don't give me that, give me this. I say, shut up and eat your steak. I ain't getting my head chopped off here. So this guy's even reaching out, hearing what Daniel's saying. Daniel is even affecting the non-believers. What did that guy have to gain by disobeying the king and obeying one of the captives? Nothing. He would have just told him, shut up and eat it. I'll kill you myself. But he didn't. He went along with this. That could have only been God. So you can see how in the worst situations we can be fantastic examples and actually make an impact on people we don't even realize. How do you know this guy wasn't going, so tell me about your God that did this? I mean, after they go through the time. Matter of fact, I'll move up so we can see it. 14. So he consented with them in this matter and tested them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their features appeared better and fatter in the flesh than all the young men who ate the portion of the king's delicacies. Thus the steward took away their portion of delicacies and the wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables. Now I have got to make sure we make this point. This is not saying we all need to be vegetarians. I know, I'm not joking, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but there are people that are like, oh, this is the Daniel, what's it called, the Daniel diet or the Daniel fast or the... No. This was specific. He didn't eat the other stuff because it had been dedicated to a pagan god. So when I come home and my wife made chicken tacos, I'm eating them. Those are the delicacies of my house. I ain't eating vegetable soup. So... Part of it, yeah. Part of it was that it wasn't kosher, but bigger than that, it had been turned over to the pagans. But yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, definitely not godly food. Definitely.
But didn't Daniel come from a prominent family?
Oh, yes.
So where they ate, specifics, like they didn't really eat meat or anything like that.
That's not true.
Kosher.
You can be kosher and eat a cow. Kosher doesn't necessarily mean, well, it does mean the food, like you can't make a kosher pig sandwich. Pigs are out no matter what. But you don't eat the blood. You don't eat a pig. But you could eat a duck. Well, no, I don't know if you could eat a duck.
What is mutton?
Lamb.
Mutton's lamb. Yeah, you could eat mutton. What was the Passover meal? Mutton. Yep. So there's meat there that they're eating, but Sid's right. It's kosher, and he's saying, I'm going to walk with God. It's pagan. They knew it was pagan. I'm going to walk with God. And he's really going out on a limb here. We're only talking about dinner. He feels pretty strongly about it. All right, 17. As for these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. And at the end of the days, when the king had said that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them before King Nebuchadnezzar, and the king interviewed them. And among them all, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they served before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding about the king, about which the king examined them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers who were in his realm. That's crazy. How old were they? 17. So by this time, 20? So now, they'd been eating godly, so he physically was checking them. Yep, that's all right. Handsome, yeah, okay. He didn't want ugly people in his court.
But remember earlier, it was a 3-year process.
3-year process. So,
It's just 10 days.
oh, well, no, this is it. At the end of the time, so at the end of the 3 years. So this is saying, the king said, bring them in. At the end of those days, bring them in, it's time. So here it is. The 3 years is up. And he goes, you guys are looking pretty good. So then he goes, now then, let's do some arithmetic tests. And it was funny. We were at that Dave Barton thing. And they showed, even in the 1800s, what our arithmetic and our basic English tests were. Our college students couldn't pass it. But we had elementary and junior high passing it in 1800. It was tough.
It was all elementary.
Oh, was it? Dave Barton was awesome. That was great. These guys are tested. They're passing up the guys he's got in his court already. Not just the ones that came up from Judah, but the ones that were already in the court already. So these guys are smoking. Where did it come from? Well, God gave them knowledge and skill in all literature and wisdom. See how God's got his hand in this? This has always been painted as, the poor Jews, people grabbed them and they were mean to them. Hold on. God gave them the victory to get up there. God gave them the treasures to get up there. God gave them the wisdom and literature. God's in charge of this. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Ooh. Now, you notice all is actually qualifying wisdom. And it shows that it was more than just the superstitious stories that were around there. See, Moses was also attributed to being very smart. He was raised up in the Pharaoh's palace, right? And they had some crazy things that they would believe. If you're bald, you get donkey poo and put it on your head and it grows. If you got an infection, you find this other stuff. I mean, this is all ancient Egyptian. But you didn't see any of that stuff from Moses leak into the law, did you? Because God was giving him knowledge, different from man knowledge. So, when you see these terms that are in here, when you start talking about like magicians and the things that are in here, research has shown that in addition to astronomy, that is a product of pagan worship. Remember Dave teaching us about the stars? Started off correct, but the pagans twisted it. Well, this is what we're talking about. Inside there was also architecture, linguistics, agriculture, meteorology, many of the sciences. And all of it was developed around, it's called the land in two rivers. It's also called the cradle of civilization, what we're talking about right here. So this is a pretty heavy area that we're talking about. Now it says, at the end of these days, then the king interviewed them, and among them none was found. So he's had guys that have been trained for a long time. You're going to see in chapter 2, remember I told you, Nebuchadnezzar was his father. He was on his way back home. He was going through Jerusalem and got word, your dad died. So now you're the man. So he takes a siege to what's left of Israel and moves on home. When he gets home, he moves into where his dad was sitting. Where his dad was sitting had a court. Who's in the court? Knuckleheads, yes men, all these guys. So he's bringing these guys in now. So he's sitting here after only taking over for a few years. So now he's noticing these guys are smarter than these knuckleheads that were around my dad. And you got to believe they're we served your dad for years. Oh, we're going to serve you. We're here, man. I'm your man. And he's sitting here going, you guys are idiots. I got these young kids that are smarter than you, and they're better looking than you. So here's how you're starting to see this happen. When you look at chapter 2, you're going to see something real interesting because he throws a massive curveball at those guys, testing them out. All right, so 21. Thus Daniel continued until the first year of King Cyrus. Okay, remember, Nebuchadnezzar, then Nebuchadnezzar, then Belshazzar, then Cyrus. This is a forecast here that Cyrus, who was a Persian, not a Babylonian, will end up taking over. So even in this first chapter, the last verse, he's saying there's going to be Persians taking over by the time Cyrus is here. And if you notice, it says until the first year. Daniel was done. He served in that court until that time. So you can see the span of years, and I believe it was in excess of 80, and he was still contributing because the knuckleheads that were around there. It started off at 17. Now, what time is it? It's 8:09. I'm going to run through these real quick. Here's the elements of moral heroism. We've got discernment. And if you want to write those down, you can look them up. Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 9. They saw precisely what was wrong with eating that prescribed food. Where do you think they learned that from? Where did those 4 Jewish boys learn that from? It wasn't public school. It wasn't the internet. They learned it from their parents. Nowhere in the Bible does God say that anybody but you is supposed to be educating and training your children. Homeschool. Absolutely. You cannot turn over, and we say it in here, you're teaching your kid about the Bible. Do not bring the kid in here and say, okay, you go on over there with Sid, she's going to teach you about the Bible. That's your job. She helps and assists and grows and whatever, but that's your job. Same thing with the other stuff. I can tell you the years that my kids were in homeschool, thank God my wife dug in with just everything she had. And they're finding in these tests that the kids that are homeschooled are not lacking social skills. They have better social skills. Because who did they hang around with? Adults. Even the kids that are around, they hang out with them, but when they get into a situation that requires maturity, they have it. You put them in the public school today, you're fighting, unwinding what they've been taught by the time they get home. All right, the next one is resistance to evil. There's some verses to write down. Distance from critical observation did not weaken it. Just because they were not at home in church with the people they went to synagogue with does not mean that they couldn't stand up for God. These guys stood up for God in the face of having their head chopped off. The next one, power to voice disagreement. See, one of the things that happens with young people is they conform. Peer pressure will take a young person and an adult today and just make them conform. If everybody else is doing something they're not supposed to, they'll conform to it. These guys right here, they said, hey, look, try us out where we don't eat that so that we do this. 17-year-old telling the chief of the guards, and you're in prison, hey, hold on a second. Hey, sir, would it be okay if we tried this? And just give me 10 days and we'll show you. That took some character. It took a lot of character to step up to that. How about physical courage? The prince of the eunuchs was right. His head was going to get chopped off as well as theirs if they ended up looking bad, if they ended up in danger. They were willing to risk it. That's physical courage that they had. These characteristics here that are happening that we're seeing right here are things that we need to have. It'd be fantastic. That's what Dave Barton was saying. Our kids need to have it because America is still the greatest nation in the world. I don't care how bad it is. It's still better than what's going on out there. And these generations are coming up, need to be trained up correctly if we're going to plan on doing anything any different. Perseverance. When no help came, you know, that first guy that he asked, Daniel tried the next guy, the steward. Okay, let's keep looking, let's keep trying. Don't just go, oh, well, I guess that's the way it is. How many times do we hear that today? People, did you ask him? I called, I left a voicemail. Really? I sent him a text. Okay. Determination. He purposed in his heart. It wasn't just, I think I better do this. It was in him. He had made it a part of him. Meekness. Without the mock heroics, you know, I'm going to do this. Pride. He respectfully requested, sir, could we try this? That doesn't mean he was weak. That means he was being respectful. Another thing that we need to train up in. They had good sense. The trial suggested was reasonable, wasn't it? Give me 10 days. If it ain't working out, you can take us off of it, nothing will happen. Just give us 10 days. They're being reasonable about it. All of that stuff I got was from the Wycliffe Bible commentary. So when you're looking up things like this, I'll grab one of the books that's in a cliff note like that. and I'll grab it, and the reference says Wycliffe Bible Commentary, I'll go grab it, and I'll go, I need this. That's why we got books laying everywhere, and you may grab just this one thing, but it's valuable. So when you hear that, maybe you could use it. Now, Daniel's career, he was destined to rise to prime prominence in Babylon's empire. Rise to the prime prominence to the subsequent Persian Empire. Both. Why was he destined? God put him there. Providence. Personally received the most astonishing prophecies in the Bible, and we'll go through them. Insane. Stuff that's wow. He's authenticated by Jesus. He's classed with Noah and Job. Daniel obeyed the Lord, and he stayed around longer than anyone else. How did he get through all 4 of those kings? Because he kept obeying God. It didn't make any difference how ugly it was, he kept going with God. You go with God, no matter how tough it gets, you're going to get through it. You start trying to compromise and do your own thing, you're gone. It's stick-to-itness, faith. He ministered to over those 4 kings. Here's the question, who's in charge here? Who's in charge? You read this today, I hope you saw a different perspective of what you thought you'd read about some of these things. Because now you're looking at this going, the whole thing was God. He's chastening those who he loves. He's giving them an opportunity to correct and straighten. Well, God, so you're saying that God kills people to teach them something? I'm telling you that if you ain't doing what you're supposed to, God can do anything he needs to, if that's what it takes. So, who's in charge? God gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar. God caused the official to show favor. God gave them skill and understanding. Do you think if they didn't get skill and understanding, they would go anywhere? No. They'd have been done like everybody else. But they stuck out because God stuck. What if they would have said, okay, we'll go ahead and eat those delicacies, the meat and all that stuff? Wouldn't have happened, would it? Compromise. 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 We've got to start getting away from it. All right, so next time, chapter 2. The one who works in the lives of individuals is also in control of the affairs of nations. God is big enough to rattle Babylon, rattle Assyria, rattle Persia, but he's also big enough to rattle us. He can handle big things, he can handle small things. In this next one, we're going to see the times of the Gentiles revealed. And it's a timeline here of subsequent history, including what's just ahead of us. So right off the bat, we jump into it. So second chapter, we're going to start digging into what's God got planned and what's Daniel talking about. So there was our first introduction.